Hello there. Welcome to AV Rant. If you are seeing this, you are watching the behind the scenes version, in case the green screen beside me today didn't alert you that this is not a normal video. No, this is behind the scenes. As such, might have audio dropouts because we're just using Google Hangouts. We'll be talking about images that actually, since you're seeing my screen today, you might actually be able to see those images as they happen.
Exciting for us.
Yeah, but the camera will probably switch back to Tom when he's talking, and it'll be all messed up. That's how it goes when things are behind the scenes. So if you would like the complete 2-hour video version that will get posted most likely on Wednesday, look for that. This is episode number 589, so you can look for the complete 2-hour video version of it Wednesday or later. Yeah, okay. With that, I'll switch over to Tom's video there. And yeah, we're all rolling and everything, right?
Yeah,
You can start when you please.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Welcome back, Daisy. There's Daisy over there.
Daisy is on my shoulder currently. She is not happy to be in here. I got to be honest with you. She'd much rather be in bed. She had a tough day because I had work done on my electrical panel, so they had to shut off the electricity, which means she didn't get any light, her normal light.
Ooh.
Please don't crawl on me. Your nails are so sharp.
Yes.
Anyways,
Daisy is a lizard, by the way, in case we have any audio-only listeners turning in for the first time.
My bearded dragon, Daisy, and she is she loves looking at the computer. If I'm watching a video or something like that, she'll just sit there and watch it. She thinks it's very interesting. She is less interested in this right now. So Daisy will be taking her leave of us very shortly.
Okay.
But people have been asking about Daisy, how she's doing. Well, you can see she's doing well. She's big. I have been assured that she is not overweight, though
Good.
I am unconvinced of that because she seems pretty plump to me. So I've been a little concerned about it, but she seems happy, and
Well, that beats when she wasn't eating for a while. That was scarier.
that was very scary.
Yeah.
She eats very well now. She's a very happy little eater, but she is our mascot, I guess.
Yes.
She's taking on the producer role. Don't crawl on me. Oh my God, it hurts so bad. I have not learned how to cut her nails, though. I have watched some videos on it.
Okay.
And I'm still afraid to do it. But there's little needle tips that you have to kind of cut off in order to make this a less painful experience. Though I suffer through it just fine. I have her crawling on me all the time. Anyways, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. If you want to contact us directly, you can contact Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect, Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. As we always do, we're going to start our podcast off by thanking our listeners. Oh, we never looked up the listeners of the week.
Oh, I thought we were just maybe, yeah. Well, that's okay. I'll talk about Patreon. You can look that up. So yeah, over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, if you would like to support us financially on a monthly basis, you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you would like. Not PayPal, Patreon. The other P that takes money. Patreon will extract however much you pledge per month and give us, what, like 70% of it? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So, yeah, we want to thank our, how many do we have now? 58 patrons that we have over there at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. And we appreciate that support very much.
We also want to thank Joshua, who went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. That is a PayPal donation and goes directly from your PayPal account or from your credit card. They take care of all that, and they give us our cut. Last week, we did announce that we have a donation match pledge from an anonymous listener who has pledged that during the week of May 7th to May 14th, any donation will be matched dollar for dollar up to $100.
Mm-hmm.
We are very excited about that, but we are also excited because one of our other listeners, James C., thought that was such a good idea that he thought he would double it. So he is also pledging $100, dollar for dollar match. So what if we get like $100?
Then only anonymouses will kick in. Yeah, just to make it clear.
Okay, are we not going to go $50 kind of thing? I guess no.
Oh, I don't know. maybe they can decide. That'd be weird. I guess we'll
Let's
let them
just go
know.
anonymous first, and then anything over that $100 goes to James.
Okay, that order in which they were received, just
There
like how we handle everything else on this podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
Please don't crawl on me. Your nails are so sharp. So that is very exciting. Now, from May 7th to May 14th, if you donate, any monies that we receive during that week will be matched by our listeners, Anonymous and James. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, so if we get $200 in donations from everybody else collectively, then Anonymous will give us $100 and James will give us $100, doubling that $200 to $400. Woo-hoo! So if you give $1, it's like you gave us $2 because of these generous folks. So thank you so much.
Right. And as soon as we figure out how much that money is, I'm going to cut a check for Rob for 50% of it or whatever I'm supposed to do.
And I better say thanks to Josh too. I forgot to say thanks, Josh, for the donation this week to PayPal.
Yes. If you can't support you can't support the podcast financially, you can always find some other way to do it. If you do, just let us know what it is, and we'll be happy to mention you as one of our listeners of the week. James registered his dual SVS SB12 NSD subwoofers on the SVS website. Damien, what is wrong with my brain? Where did I get James from?
That's very far. Well, there was James C. who just did the dollar for dollar match thing, so that must have been on your mind. It's Damien who registered his
dual SVS SB12 Dynasties subwoofers and chose the AV Rant checkmark box under the How Did You Hear About Us section. I think that's a ridiculous amount of people we've sent their way if they needed a checkmark box for us.
I like it.
I like it too. Carl shared the spreadsheet he uses to plan his computer builds and offered me a lot of advice for my son's potential computer thing. He's still in the doghouse. My son is still way in the doghouse. John S., who was the guy who sent the computer build, the HP or whatever it was, that was like $650. I emailed him and said, hey, one of my other listeners sent me this video card. Now what's your recommendation? And he sent me another long email that I have.
Good.
So thank you very much, John S., for that. And Felipe pounced on the B-stock monoprice monolith amplifiers and let the monoprice know that we recommended them. He got a 7-channel unit that he says looks completely blemish free, although it's shipped with the wrong power cord.
Yeah.
How do you know it's not? Anyways, he got a replacement power cord and wrangled the 100-pound amp into place. It works flawlessly with his Marantz AV7705, so he's very pleased with it. So thank you, Felipe, John, Carl, Damien /James.
Yeah, I've been monitoring the stock over there of the monoprice monolith amps. They do actually have the 7-channel XLR input version in stock. It was in stock, then it was out of stock, then it's back in stock as of like a couple of minutes ago. We're recording this on Monday, April the 30th.
Yeah.
And they have some B stock of the 5-channel model, the old one that did not have XLR inputs, and some of the 7-channel B stock as well. So they're getting some units in there from ATI, their OEM. But Felipe, thanks very much for the support. John and Carl, thanks for helping out Tom with the PC stuff. And Damien, congrats on your dual SB12 NSDs, and thanks for check marking us over at SVS.
We've got some news, and Rob will read it to you and talk about it while I put Daisy to bed.
Sounds good. So first bit of news is coming in from our good friend James Bujo. The first...
nails are so sharp.
There's a reason to watch YouTube. You can see Tom getting clawed to death. So the first of the Samsung LED cinema screens to be installed in the U.S. has been installed at the Pacific Theater's Winnetka, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's in Chatsworth, California. So they're using the same 34-foot wide 4K resolution HDR design that they installed earlier in Korea. And the first movie that they showed on this new screen in Chatsworth, California is Ready Player One, although they showed it in standard dynamic range. They didn't use the high dynamic range capabilities. The article was saying that they're claiming 300 nits peak brightness for HDR on this gigantic 34-foot wide screen. I'd previously heard 500 nits might be possible, but they're saying 300 for now, so maybe being a bit conservative. More details about mastering for the Cinema LED screen have been released. So to take full advantage of its HDR capabilities, which are about 3 times brighter than a regular Dolby Cinema projection system with HDR, a whole new post-production pass has to be used and paid for. It's Samsung. They're not using Dolby Vision. So if anyone wants to use this thing, they have to make a specialized version for it. It costs about $800,000, which is more than twice the price of the dual laser-based HDR projectors that Dolby Cinemas use. So it's spendy, but Samsung says their display will last longer. And I don't like this proposal, but they're like, hey, you know what you could do? You could have premium screenings where you eat and drink and people can do whatever they want like they're in their living room because you can keep the lights on because it won't wash out the screen because now it's just a big LED screen. I'm like, that's all we need is for people to feel even more like they're in their living room when they're out at the theater. Like, thank you, no. But
I don't want to see you while I am watching a movie.
Like the only thing that's keeping people even a modicum of like behaving themselves is that they're in complete pitch blackness. That's like the only thing alerting.
I mean, you could say that there's some sort of social shame that will go on if you start acting up during the movie. But I find any sort of movement so distracting during movies. I don't want anybody to move. I definitely don't want
people being brought food in the middle of the movie.
Ugh.
Jeez.
If that happens, I have to be able to press pause. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can. I think that there needs to be a pause button that you like. Once enough people press it, then the movie pauses for 5 minutes and you can go to the bathroom or something like that. I mean, I think that's just the way it has to be.
Anyway, could be the future of screens. They can't install the speakers behind it because there's no way to make it acoustically transparent, but Samsung owns Harman, and they know a thing or two about sound, so they're putting speakers above the screen and ones that are like reflecting off of the screen and bouncing the sound back to you and all kinds of fun stuff.
All right, SVS has introduced a new $90 SoundPath wireless adapter kit, which is a subwoofer solution, wireless subwoofer solution here. Very excited about that. That's $90 doesn't seem too expensive.
Yeah, that's less expensive than Outlaws.
Right,
one.
that's the one I was thinking of. But I like Outlaws.
I like the form factor of Outlaws a little better because this one still uses the 3.5 millimeter stereo input jacks. They give you the adapter cables that you need, of course. SVS does, but it's that, and it's USB powered, so they give you the USB power adapters. SVS does, but I'm like, I don't know. I kind of like the form, but $90 should work. There you go.
JC, just different than the rapper. Emotiva is closing out their Bass Axe speakers. Now I won't be able to say Bass Axe anymore.
Well, the Bass Axe, the amplifiers and the Bass Axe series.
The Bass Axe SAT and Bass Axe LCR are both half price and on clearance right now. So
if you want some cheap, not as small as you would expect, being called satellite speakers, but inexpensive speakers that got ho-hum reviews, but they're cheap now, so...
At least they're cheap. We got cheap down.
Very cheap.
Oh, well. A couple of quick comments here. James, House of Cards. James, I don't remember ever calling him that anyways. He got to spend a 2-hour... I'm going to keep saying that every time. I'm going to say, it's just because I don't ever... I'm going to have to be reminded of the picture that made me say that. He got to spend a 2-hour listening session at Kef's Music Studio in Hong Kong. They had their flagship Muon speakers set up, and they became James's new favorites. They're not even $200,000. So it's quite reasonable. It's like $199,999.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyways, they're a bit bigger than the LS50 speakers we've spoken so highly about. They're taller than he is.
Yeah,
and he is another short man. And if you're watching the YouTube version, you can see the LS50 that's on the stand right next to it. Now, when this speaker is sort of like, and we've seen these before, like in car stuff, where they'll come out with like some sort of highly advanced prototype car that never really makes it. They maybe make 20 of them for like, rappers and sports stars, and that's about it.
They do sell these things, yeah.
But this thing was really, we want to make a no holds bar, like best technology we possibly put in the speaker, and we'll sell some of them, we'll sell them or whatever. But this is going to be this, and then that is going to trickle down to their other speakers, and it has worked. I remember when the speaker came out, it has worked remarkably well. You've started to see a lot of the technology that's in this Muon speaker in their other speakers, and I think it's been to their benefit to have made this speaker.
Yeah, no, he said it's his new favorite for under 200,000. That's the goalpost. So there you go. Good that you're having fun there, James. Though, I'd take a listen to him too if they were available. Why the heck not?
I would love to go to Hong Kong. Oh my God, I aspirated some of that water.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm gonna die. Yes, I'm dying now.
Okay, well, while you
how am I
catch your
gonna talk through this podcast?
well, while you catch your ability to breathe again, I'll mention I did see Avengers: Infinity War. I absolutely will not spoil it for anybody.
You can say one word about this movie, and I will absolutely kill you.
Sure.
Somebody on the radio said something, and then I don't know if they were serious or a joke, but I stopped. I'm never listening to that channel again.
So nothing about the movie. I'm simply saying my overwhelming feeling, having watched it, is that I was impressed.
Okay.
Because that is my overwhelming feeling. I certainly enjoyed it. I would definitely watch it again. So automatically, if I say I feel like I got my money's worth, that's a thumbs up from me. So certainly that. But more than like liking it or loving it, I'm just like I am impressed that this thing was made. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. I haven't seen it yet, and I probably won't for quite some time. I really can't bring myself to go back to the movie theater. I'm sorry. I want to. Deadpool 2 is coming out. I'm very excited about that. Also not going to the theater for that one. I just can't bring myself to do it.
You have to. I can't not talk about Deadpool with you for like 3 months or something until you finally see it.
You're just gonna have to live with that because I really wish I had gone to the theater to see Thor Ragnarok because the Ultra Blu-ray transfer is such garbage. The audio is so bad.
Well, there you go. Maybe the fear that Infinity War's transfer will be bad too. That'll get you to.
I feel like I should get a refund. I really do. I'm very disappointed in that. All right, let's get to these questions. Let's see how many we can power through in an hour and a half. Justin, not Bieber on Facebook. Justin has decided to take our advice and will probably just put a TV all by itself in his loft while setting up one of his spare bedrooms as a small dedicated theater. Remember, Justin has moved into a new house and he had a loft area that was adjacent to all the bedrooms and was going to put a home theater there, which we said was maybe not optimal. So as such, he'll be looking to complete his theater setup for around $1,500. He needs a center speaker to match his RBH Impression Series Gen 1 towers and an inexpensive 5.1 receiver. He'd like to get an inexpensive projector with the intention to get the screen later. So the new Gen 2 RBH Impression Series center is $215. That seems like a lock, right? I'd say so. Okay with that purchase. Yes. There's no I can imagine no world where one RBH Impression Series speaker does not match the other, no matter what generation they come from. I just can't imagine it. So yes, that's a lock.
And it seems like it should work within your available budget. So
So he wants eventually to get a 5.2.4 setup going. So he really just needs a 5.1 receiver to tide him over for a while. Any reason not just to get the cheapest Denon that Accessories for Less sells?
So that'd be the S530. Which is like $130 right now.
That's pretty cheap.
The only reason is that it does not pass through Dolby Vision. But he's talking about using a projector, so that wouldn't matter. That's like the one feature it doesn't have that somebody might legitimately want. And if that's you, because we're not only talking to Justin on this podcast, for a inexpensive entry-level receiver, I like the Yamaha RXV 383. They have it for the interesting price at Accessories for Less of $188.88 right now. So I'm not quite sure.
8 a lucky number for somebody over there?
Like 8 is a lucky number in China. It's a lucky number. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on in China right now.
I don't know.
But yeah.
No, so the answer to your question is there's absolutely no reason not to. And if you're going to buy a 5.1 receiver to tide you over, and you said anything other than I'm going to get the world's cheapest one, then I mean, yes, you should get the cheapest one because you don't want to waste any more money on this thing.
Now, I mean, the S530 does not have any form of Odyssey. It just has it does have an auto setup with a microphone, but it's very
it would be nice if it had distance. Pre-ins for 2-channel for left and right. That's the only thing I might consider.
Like a CD input?
Something like that, yeah.
I believe it does.
Yeah. So my thought here is that you could use it afterwards as an amp.
Right.
As you just turn it into an amp for your speakers.
A 2-channel amp.
And I think that that might be the only thing I would be just make sure you could turn it into an amp later on, and then it's less of a waste of money, which this one should be no problem. Most of them will have.
Honestly, that's pretty good as a 2-channel amp. Like a lot of 2-channel amps cost about that much anyway.
So what entry-level projector should he get? He was considering the $500 Optima HD 143X.
So here's where I would encourage you to spend a little bit more.
Yeah, those really entry level projectors are like so garbage.
The gap in performance between that $500 Optima, which like Wirecutter picked that as their top choice for $500 or less.
Right.
Okay. But the gap between that one and the $700 BenQ HT 2050 is a big and very worthwhile difference.
Yeah.
And so given that you are still well under $1,000 here for the $700 BenQ 2050, I have to encourage you to spend a little bit more money to get that.
Yeah. It's very hard for me to say. I mean, I'm almost of the opinion that he has a flat panel already, right?
Yeah,
Why
but that's
not?
staying in the loft.
I know. Why not get something a smaller, display that you could use downstairs, upstairs or whatever, or something cheaper? I mean, because you can get a 55-inch something or another for under $500 these days.
Yes, but I mean, the whole point of the dedicated room was to get something you hadn't had before, which projector.
Well, I'm saying that this would be cheaper than doing that, and then you could just wait on the projector. But this is fine.
I don't know what kind of a 65-inch TV are you getting for $500?
No,
I mean, you could get the $1,000 TCL, but that's more than the $700 BenQ, and it's not nearly as big.
That's true. I was just thinking like upstairs, you take the current TV you've got, bring it downstairs, buy just a small TV. It wouldn't have to be 55, 65, whatever inches. It's just something for upstairs for watching TV. Then when you get your projector, you take the TV that was downstairs, the good projector, you bring it upstairs, then take the smaller TV and you're like, I got an extra TV. Yay! And then you put it someplace else. But I don't know. It's to me, I don't like the idea of buying a projector that isn't that you're not going to stick with. You know what I mean? I feel like there's nothing to do with it once you get to the next projector. I'd rather you purchase something that you can potentially do something with later on. Whereas,
hey, 2050 looks nice though. So
I'm not saying it doesn't look nice, Rob. I'm saying that if you're going to buy a projector, buy a good one. That's all. All right, so if it all goes sideways and he ends up using the loft as his theater after all, would having the brightest projector he can afford be helpful? Don't let this go sideways.
Yeah, don't even entertain that idea if at all possible.
No.
You don't want the projector in the loft.
No.
So
many things would be better off. Your whole life will be better if I know that sounds like I'm being overly dramatic here, but the reality is you put that home theater up there next to all those bedrooms, you are never going to be able to enjoy it the way you want to.
Yeah.
Or you're never going to have a very happy life because everybody's going to be mad at you for waking them up. Kids might not care as much as the wife will, and it's just going to cause family strife that you don't need. So don't. I don't think we should even answer that. But when the first times we ever just walked away from the question.
Just to answer it in general, I mean, having a very, very bright projector, it might allow you to see that there is an image being cast onto your wall or screen, but we make out images by the contrast, and the contrast is equally determined by the dark parts of the image, not only the bright parts. So if your image is washed out, it's washed out. The brighter the projector is, the more you'll be able to see, oh yeah, there's something up there. And maybe if all you watch is very bright images, you can kind of make out something. Right. But this is not the way to come at a projector. You want the room to be dark.
I had this, what I used to do, and this is maybe not an option you want to consider, but what I used to do is I had a home theater projector that was good, but the room I was in was very light. And there was no light control in this particular room. This was when I lived in Australia. So I had this business class portable projector that could not fill up my screen from the distance that we were at, and it was extremely dim. But the projector itself was like an LCD, like an LED driven, blah blah blah.
Yeah, one of the little micro LED ones.
Yeah, so it's like as bright as it can possibly be, but I didn't care because it was like daytime watching and everything else, and I just had it to have something up there so I could watch TV during the day or watch something during the day because. The other projector just wasn't. It was getting the contrast and everything was just absolutely hosed.
Yeah,
and I didn't want to reset the calibration just for daytime viewing. So that was my solution to do that. But you know, the reality is just don't do this. Don't go upstairs. So he asked, where do we recommend shopping for projectors? No. What was the website we used to use all the time?
Visual Apex.
Visual Apex is the one all the time. Yes.
Yeah. AV Science. Yeah. A very good place as well. However, if you do end up going with the BenQ 2050, like I recommend, you can just get that sucker at Amazon.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I would always check Amazon and B&H Photo and stuff like that. You never know what you're going to be able to find deals there. I always kind of cross-check them.
Yeah.
So as mentioned, he'll probably hold off on getting the screen right away. Silver ticket seems like an obvious choice if he goes for a fixed frame screen mounted on the wall. But what if he wants to have a motorized screen that comes down in front of a flat panel? We're right back on the flat panel.
I know.
Okay. Back on the front. Would elite screens be the way to go, and would a lack of tab tensioning to keep the cost down be a deal breaker? I'll be honest with you, dude. I don't really see why you would go with a flat panel than a screen to drop down in front of it. You're going to be into a room that's going to be 100% light controlled.
Yes.
Because it's a dedicated theater. I mean, that's what a dedicated theater is. You have light control. That's the whole point. Why would you want to have a smaller screen?
I'm sure he's either envisioning sometimes lights on viewing and or different screen sizes for different content. Possible reasons.
I could see the reasons, but for the amount of money that you're going to spend to do this, especially if you're trying to keep this cheap, a fixed framed silver ticket screen is like $120, $130. It's ridiculously inexpensive. It is 3 or 4 times that to get something that is a motorized drop screen. That's entry level.
Yeah. No, to me, this is a mindset question to deal with, because if you're working within a budget, to me, it's like, let's get the best experience you can within that budget, rather than, can I stretch my budget to half measure do something that could be done really well if I had, 4 times as much money to spend, but instead I'm going to try and skimp and, all over the place to make this happen. It's like, that's not the way I would want to come at this. I want to maximize the budget that you have, and the way to do that is get your fixed frame screen. The silver ticket ones are great and inexpensive.
Yeah, if you think that you're going to sometimes want to use a smaller screen or whatever, for daytime viewing or something like that, or more casual viewing, that casual viewing happens upstairs.
Yeah, go do it in the loft. Yeah, exactly.
Just walk up the stairs and go watch it up there. The theater is for watching movies or sit down experiences, and that's what it's for. Saves your bulb that way, so that's what I would say.
Yeah.
He says, lastly, the spare bedroom will have a closet, and he was thinking he'd put all his gear in the closet to save space. But will it get too hot with the closet door closed? And will he be able to prevent the closet door from rattling? Should he maybe just remove the closet door and line the closet walls with some leftover Roxul insulation? The closets are not centered on the wall, so there would be an off-center positioning matter in terms of the closet being like a base trap. You could take, first of all, you can take the door off. That's what I did with mine. Mine was one of those like quad, I don't know, those accordion doors. So I just took the doors off the thing because they were rattling, and there was no getting away from that rattle. So I just took them off and I sent them outside, thinking, well, when I'm done living here, I'll just put them back on. Well, I live in Florida. Those doors lasted about 3 weeks before they completely warped and I had to throw them away. So I have to buy new ones. But that's a perfectly fine solution. If heat can be an issue depending on how much gear and what gear you have in there, and lining it with Roxul is only going to make that heat worse.
Well, yeah, if you have a door and the Roxul, that's not good times. I mean, even with a louvered door, it's still going to be acting like a base trap because the air can move through the louvered door. So you might as well just take the door off if that's what you're going to do.
Right. So I would, if you're thinking of putting all the gear in there and you would like to keep the door closed and everything else, well, we can keep the door from rattling if it's a regular door. That's not impossible. Just like I did in here, you just put a little bit of the rubber insulation tape around the jamb. Inside the jamb where the door is touching, and it won't rattle. But you're going to need some sort of exhaust in here, and installing exhaust that goes up into your attic, or it might have to go all the way out into your onto your roof or something like that, is something with a fan, with a fan, just like a normal bathroom fan, But you're going to want to. This is actually a cost because the bathroom fans that are cheap are loud, and you will hear them through a closed door.
Yeah, they do make quiet 100%. Ones, but they don't come cheap.
But they're not cheap. That's right. The quiet ones are real quiet, though. So, it might be worth it for you to do all that, or just take the door off.
Just take the door off.
And not worry about the insulation or any of the rest of that nonsense.
Yeah, and if you want to use some of that insulation, door off, I wouldn't line the whole thing.
No, I wouldn't
maybe put in what would be the equivalent of a panel in there, just so that if there's some echo, you're going to deaden that a little bit, or some, not echo, but reflection of the sound within that cavity. You're going to deaden that a little bit, but I wouldn't go lining the whole thing, because that will trap heat in there as well, even with the door off. So
yeah. So I mean, mine's is basically thinner than a normal closet. I mean, it's about the same size as a normal closet, but it's double wide. So I've got in one corner, I've got a corner bass trap because it fit there, and I've got one panel because it fit there. And then my gear is off.
It'll stop, the major reflection within the cavity, but it's not going to heat everything up.
Bill says he's just getting his feet wet with home theater, but he's diving straight into Atmos.
Oh, right.
All right. Well, you've come to the right place. This echo chamber of Atmos is at your disposal. I'm going to be honest with you, Rob. In real life, how many people have you met who have ever said the words Atmos out loud without having a question mark after it? What's Atmos?
One. One. Yep.
I think that's zero for me. I don't think anybody's ever said Atmos or I've talked about Atmos and they've been like,
I mean, of course, present company excluded, of course.
Well, we never saw each other in person.
That's true.
We don't count. Anyways, okay, so Bill says he's got a Sony DN1080 receiver, which can do 5.1.2, and he's got a 7.1 Pioneer Andrew Jones speaker package with tower fronts, the center 2 pairs of bookshelf speakers, and the 8-inch sub. He has vaulted ceilings, so he was advised that the upward firing modules would not be a good choice. So he is going to mount one pair of the bookshelf speakers at his Atmos speakers. But where should they go? He could mount them either to his front wall or his back wall as front heights or rear heights, or he could mount them on his ceilings as top fronts or top middles. What would be the best placement in our opinion? First of all, I am not 100% convinced that those Atmos modules wouldn't work for you, because I don't think they actually bounce sound. I don't think they do. I think it's all psychological. And fake.
Well, it's all the head-related transfer function. That said, putting them on top of your speakers, whether they're genuinely bouncing the sound off your ceiling or not, every account is that they're not as good as just having the actual speaker physically above you. So
I like the idea of putting them high up on your walls to the sides of your couch and angling them slightly down as if they were prime elevation speakers and calling them top middles.
But I mean, he's saying if he can mount them to his ceiling, and that's not an issue.
Oh, if you can mount them directly above on your ceiling facing straight down, that's the best.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to notice that the most out of any of the positions for sure. The only thing I would say that might be different, so we're saying top middles. That's what we're saying.
Yes, we're saying
straight above you. The only reason you might consider doing something different would be if you plan to upgrade to having 4 overhead speakers at some point in the not too distant future. You could still do that if you install top middles, because you can just go ahead and install front heights. And there you go. That'll work. But if you're like, I know that in the future I want to have top fronts and top rears, then go ahead and install them as top fronts right now if you know that you're going to be installing top rears later.
I only agree with that is if you are running the wires in your wall.
Yeah.
If you are doing something else where you can move them easily.
Oh yeah, if you can move them later.
I would still go top middles for right now.
I agree with that.
All right. Adriano says, what's the best way to goose the bass a bit? He's using AVR 4311, which has Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT. And he has dual SVS SB2000 subs in diagonally opposite corners. We should have A, B, and C's on this one. But anyways, should he increase the volume dial on the back of each subwoofer a bit? B, should he increase the trim level for each sub in the dead-end settings? C, and since the 4311 has independent dual subwoofer settings, would he always increase the trim levels the exact same amount for both subs, or could they potentially have different trim level boosts? All right. Is this one of the ones that can use the Odyssey app?
4311, no.
Okay. Because the answer for anybody who's got a more recent denon is use the Odyssey app, and you can change the curve. And that would be the easiest way.
To edit the target curve to include a boost in the base.
That would be the easiest way to do it, and then you could adjust it on the fly, basically, however you want it. Now he can't do that.
He can't.
So should he increase the volume dial in the back of each subwoofer a bit? No, I don't believe so, and I think the reason for that is that it is imprecise, and it would have a hard time making sure that the subs were both getting the same amount of boost. Should he increase the trim level in the sub and for each sub in the deadening settings? That would be a way to do it for sure. And since he asks, would he always increase the trim levels the exact same? My answer to that would be yes. I would increase them exactly the same.
Yeah, with the afterword being that, if one of your subs is significantly closer to you than the other,
right?
And so you go ahead and you boost the trim level for sub 1 and sub 2 the same amount, and after you do that you go, but now I notice that the sub that's really close to me, I notice it seems louder. Well, then it's a little bit of trial and error, but you back that one down or raise the other one up a little bit more independently. Nothing says that you don't tune this to taste properly afterward, but that the starting point is the easiest way to do it is to increase your trim level a little bit and equally for both subs. But that's the starting point.
Haven't denons for years always had like a base adjustment in them?
Well, I mean, there's just a regular bass tone control, but that doesn't really go all the way down to the really, really low stuff. That's just your bass tone control.
That wouldn't be enough for him.
I don't know. I guess you could try it, but
try that as well, I suppose.
Yeah. So it was interesting over on Twitter. Had a very short little back and forth with the guy who does the Subwoofer 101 channel over on YouTube and that. And so he was just mentioning how there is a little bit of a caveat to this advice of just raising the trim level, because so he used the extreme example just to make the point, which was, let's say you boosted the trim level in your receiver all the way up to its maximum, like plus 12 or plus 16 or whatever the max is, and then turn the volume dial on your subwoofer down to bring it back to reference level. And you listen to it that way. And then you do the polar opposite. You turn the trim level all the way down to its very, very lowest setting and turn the volume of your subwoofer, the volume dial on your subwoofer, up to, again, get it back to reference level. If you do that experiment, you'll very often find that when you've put the trim level all the way up at max, you do actually lose headroom in the signal. You lose dynamic range. And that makes sense because what you're doing is completely shrinking the available voltage that's coming out of that pre-out.
That's true.
You've just pegged the voltage of the pre-out at its maximum, which could be two things. One, there's no more voltage for that pre-out to give to say, hey, make this signal any louder, and therefore you've lost that headroom. Or all amplifiers at some point just become saturated. They're like, you can give me more voltage, but I'm just not going to get any louder in response. This is as loud as I get. So there is that facet to it, which
to combat this, if you're going to do that, what you're going to want to do is turn your subwoofers themselves up. When you do your auto calibration, you want to turn your subwoofers up so that the trim level that it sets on the denon would be in the negative someplace.
In a little bit into the negatives or at zero. I mean, if you get it so that it's at zero and you're like, I just want it a little bit louder. I just want it 3 decibels louder.
No possible. I mean, I would be very surprised if somebody's like, I'm at reference 0 right now, but plus 12 is where I really like it. I'd be like, holy moly, dude, that's quite a bit louder.
Like I would say if you're doing it via the trim level and you're starting to get up towards plus 9, plus 10 or something, at that point I would say, you know what? Turn the volume dials on your subs up, both of them. I know Odyssey will tell you they're too loud to start, but ignore it and just proceed anyway. Because what that's telling you is you want considerably more bass than what you should really do with the trim level. Use the trim level for plus 3, plus 5. That should be fine. But if you start going beyond that, maybe turn the volume dials up first and then redo the process.
He says there's a button on the Denon's remote as well as on the front panel labeled direct/ stereo. The manual says to push this button once to activate the stereo listening mode and push it twice to activate direct listening mode. The manual also says that in stereo listening mode, all of the tone controls, Odyssey, and the subwoofer outputs would be active, but in direct listening mode, all of those things get turned off. But if he puts it in stereo listening mode, his subwoofers don't seem to make any sound. So is there any idea? This is something that you will encounter in Denon's, and I think Yamaha's do it as well, which is you can have independent settings for your stereo listening versus your multi-channel listening. So you may have found that your stereo listening mode was automatically configured to not include subwoofers, which means you have to go into your audio setup someplace, and you will be able to turn those things back on.
Yeah, so it was let's call it interesting to go back and read one of the older style Denon manuals for the 4311. The old way that they used to write, I'm like, oh dear God, thank goodness they've improved at least a little bit, because that was painful. And I don't blame you for not having found this in the manual, because it was buried in there. But there is a settings menu within your Denon that is called playback. And within that playback settings menu, there is an advanced section. And under that advanced section, there's one called output levels. And there's independent output levels for stereo mode and surround mode. Right. And within the stereo mode, which is buried under playback advanced output levels, you can turn the subwoofer off in the stereo listening mode, which for some god-awful reason is the default. Yeah. So it's in your manual. If you're like, what the heck did Rob just say? It is in your manual. Look for the playback advanced settings. And
honestly, dude, Denon manuals, they never should have printed them. The old ones, they never should have printed them. They should all be PDF so that you can control F. So you can
but even then, would you know to look for playback advanced output?
You would at least find stereo. You at least search for stereo, and it would after hitting, it'd find like 7. Results, I was gonna say 700 results. After getting to result number 465, you'd be like, oh, there it is.
There it is.
Clearly, I where I work right now, the manual that's like the employee handbook manual is like 45 pages long. It's been amended over and over again for 14 years with no editing done to it whatsoever. So they asked me to go through and write a table of contents for it. And my table of contents was like, hold the control button, hold F.
Yeah.
Put in the term you want to know, what you want to know about, press enter. Because I'm like, you are out of luck if you think I could write it. This is not going to happen. Jonathan was watching The Shape of Water using his 7.2 speaker setup. He noticed some excellent panning effects in the soundtrack, but one in particular grabbed his attention. The sound started in the center, and then it panned to the right. The sound perfectly tracked the object being shown on the screen, including going off the screen to the right, but also well below the height of the screen. He's never really heard this height effect of going below the screen before. So, A, was it maybe not the actual sound at all, and instead his brain just tricked him into thinking the sound was coming from close to the floor because of what his eyes were telling him? It could very well be that. It's more likely phase. They're using phase just to send information that your brain recognizes as being coming from a different direction. And the way that works, if you think about it this way, is you got an ear on either side of your head, right? If you make the sounds on one side slightly out of phase with the sounds on the other side, you reposition the sound in the space, because your brain will say, okay, if this sounds this way and this sounds this way, then the sound must be coming from X. But if they're equally loud, it should be coming from directly in front of you, which is what that phantom center is. So by changing that phase, or they're not equally loud, but equally in phase. By changing that phase, it shifts where in the three-dimensional space it is. Good speakers do that really well. Poor speakers, it always kind of sounds like it's coming from somewhere up front.
Yeah, this is using the head-related transfer function idea again. We've normally been talking about using that to create virtual overhead speakers because of Atmos and DTS:X, and that's what we've been talking about. But the same thing can be applied to make sounds go below. Right. That is a head-related transfer function thing as well. We can detect when sounds are above or below. We don't only hear side to side. So it's using that. Now, I would bet you that if you did not have the visuals, the effect might not be quite as pronounced. I'll bet you the visuals are playing a role in it.
Well, we see this all the time in movies whenever there's an action movie and somebody's hitting somebody. If you turn if you've turned the sound off, it's like, clearly they're not touching each other. You put the sound back on, and like, that guy just got rocked. You know what I mean?
But even with the image gone, I'll bet you would still go, oh yeah, that sound seemed to go down.
Right.
So
yeah. So it didn't seem to be a particularly deep bass sound, but could it have somehow been mixed into only the bass woofers and subwoofers of a sound system, so it really did emanate from close to the floor? And
No.
it's not going to have anything to do with that. There's no way they could just tell the lower speaker, drivers. And there's lots of speakers that don't have lower drivers anyways.
I mean, you can mix something into only the LFE channel, which you can
that's true.
Tell your system to only play out of the subwoofer. But that's clearly, he's like, no, it wasn't like a only came out of my subwoofer. So
well, and plus anything that's only coming out of your subwoofer should be omnidirectional anyways. It doesn't make any difference where it is. So was it his room acoustics and it just happened to all work out? Or could it have been some other intentional audio trick? Well, it was the phase thing. But your room acoustics and everything else that you have going on, and positioning, everything, helped this be successful.
Yeah.
This is only successful because you've paid attention to the acoustics of your room.
Oh, yeah.
And you've paid attention to the placement and the setup of your speakers. If you were less paying attention to these things, if you were less concerned about them, then this would have been a much less effective trick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Agreed.
This particular panning sound really did seem to come from where the sound should have come from, given what was being shown on the screen. I wanted to go see this movie for a long time. Now I really want to see it. But it was so perfectly matched that he actually found it distracting. It took him out of the movie for a moment because most other soundtracks are not as perfect. So he wasn't expecting it. Is that the sort of problem only a total AV geek would have? No, you run into this quite a bit. And whenever we come into a new technology, and I think 3D suffered from this a lot, which is it's distracting. It is distracting to watch something be overly 3D. This spear pointing out at you from the middle of the screen. You're like, okay, stop it. That doesn't look right. That's not what I should see. There's not a 75-foot long spear tip in the middle of this theater. I know that. That's why I have always maintained, and I can continue to maintain, that 3D should be depth.
Yeah, going into the screen.
Into the screen, not out into the room.
Well, I mean, the odd effect here and there, just for laughs, just for fun, I'm fine with that. But
I think I agree with is it Jonathan? I think they asked this question. That it does take you out of the movie, and it can't. Now,
I don't know. I appreciate good mixing like that. Kind of like Avengers. It impresses me when they handle it well. I like that.
Well, and this is if you don't stop talking about the Avengers, I'm gonna end this podcast like
that is all I will say. I promise.
You keep saying it, and I'm gonna get angry. I'm just saying.
Jeez.
No spoilers. I will.
How is that a spoiler?
I don't care. Close. I feel like you're going that direction.
I will not. I can control myself. Yeesh.
No, but I mean, I think that only a total AV geek would have this sort of problem, because maybe only a total AV geek would have a system that could represent
that could be the case for sure,
as well as your system has done it. That being said, I've had this. We've had this experience before in movies where a sound, especially horror movies, they like to do stuff like that, where you can hear footsteps around you and stuff like that. It can sort of be distracting from the movie, but I think you're going to appreciate it more after the first time you see it. So maybe don't worry about it too much. Jeremy on Twitter. Jeremy wants to do a subwoofer crawl. Where should he get some bass sweeps? What is that website, Rob?
Audiocheck.net.
That's the place.
Audiocheck.net. They have some pre-made ones that you can download, or you can generate your own, which I like to do, because then you get exactly what you want.
Yeah. So should he obviously be on or off when he does the subwoofer crawl? Well, I mean, I don't know how you're going to run it before you do it, but yeah, it should be off.
It should definitely be off. Yes. Yeah, because what you're trying to do is use the native output of the subwoofer sitting where you would normally sit, and then you go around your room to all the places where the subwoofer could live, and you're trying to hear ideally the most uniform, but that would require moving things around. So you're looking for the spot that gives you no gigantic dips. That's really what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because humps you can fix, little dips in the response you can fix, but a big old dip or a complete on null, no good, no bueno. So you want the native response of the sub, no Odyssey on.
Brandon is getting an Epson Home Cinema 4000 projector. It can accept 4K and HDR10, but it's limited to 30 frames per second at 4K. And of course, it doesn't do Dolby Vision, because no projectors do. His flat panel TV is 4K and can do Dolby Vision. So if he connects both his flat panel and his Epson projector twin HDMI outputs on his Marantz receiver? Will he be limited to the lowest common denominator in all cases, meaning no Dolby Vision and no 60 frames per second content on his flat panel? Okay, I'm gonna make a guess because I have no clue, but I would guess that Dolby Vision would go through, but it would be limited to 30 frames per second. That would be my guess.
So, I mean, usually with projectors, when they're off, they're off.
That is also true, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Could be proven wrong easily. But usually when the projector's off, it's off. And I don't imagine that when you're using your flat panel, you will also have the projector on. That would seem a little strange, although maybe, who knows?
I guess the one situation I can think of might come into play is if you're watching the projector and then you power off the projector and you power on the flat panel, the projector is going to take a while to cool down before it turns completely off. So at that point, they would both be on at the same time.
Yeah, so if they're both on at the same time, it will be lowest common denominator. It'll be the Dolby Vision won't go through. It'll be HDR10. So you'll get HDR10 on both. You'll get 30 frames per second maximum on both if they're both on at the same time. If you have the projector on with the flat panel on, that doesn't lower any of the capabilities of your projector. So that's not the concern. The only concern is, would the projector potentially lower the capabilities of the TV? So if you have powered off the projector, most projectors, once they're fully off, they are fully off, and it should work. It should pass 60 frames and Dolby Vision to your flat panel, but with the caveat, we could be wrong.
Yeah. So does 60 frames per second for 4K content really even matter? Any chance Epson will support 4K at 60 frames per second with their next generation of projectors? And if so, when will those be released? Yes, it probably matters. Will Epson support 4K with 60? Yes. Inevitably, they're going to support everything, but perhaps Dolby Vision. And if so, when will those be released? I'm going to say Cydia.
Yeah, probably. I mean, honestly, I expected them to replace the 5040 UB at last year's Cydia. Yeah, I was anticipating that, and it didn't happen. I would be quite surprised if they don't do it at Cydia 2018. So that's taking place in September, and then usually the things that are announced there are available to buy in October or November. So I would be kind of surprised if they don't replace the 5040 UB with a model that can accept 60 frames per second. That's becoming pretty standard. Is it important for 4K content? Definitely if you're a video game player.
That's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. There's one movie, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, that's in 60 frames per second. That's the only one at the moment. All the rest are either 24 frames or 30 frames, so those wouldn't matter. But yeah, mostly for games. That's where it would really matter.
So we've talked about how some speakers intentionally aim for their own characteristic curve or signature sound, but wouldn't Odyssey or something similar like Dirac get rid of that? If two different speakers are both EQ'd by the same system, would they end up sounding exactly the same, or can they still have different timbre and coloration? Well, Odyssey is what it is. It's going to try to correct things to a certain degree, but it can only do so much. If your speaker rolls off at 14 kilohertz, no amount of Odyssey EQing it is going to make it not roll off. If it's got a I guess bass boost or something like that might be a little bit more EQable, but I mean, if it's dramatic, there's no way that Odyssey is going to be able. It's only going to be able to do so much. So if you have two similar performing speakers in the same room, and you Odyssey in both, I would expect them to sound more similar than dissimilar. Okay, if their performance is about the same. But if you have a speaker that's obviously doing some things that the other speaker cannot do, Odyssey is not going to be able to make those speakers sound exactly the same. That's one factor. The other factor is that timbre, what we call the tone or the timbre of an instrument or of a speaker. That's all about the harmonics. Yeah.
And that is not being affected much, if at all, by an EQ system. The EQ system is affecting the original impulse sound, the fundamental sound, or there are, of course, harmonics contained in the recording, but it's affecting the original signal. Then the speaker itself is producing some extraneous sounds that weren't in the original signal. I mean, the very, very best speakers don't. They're just completely true to the signal.
Right.
But there's no such thing as a completely perfect speaker. Every sound-producing thing produces some little bits of extraneous sound that weren't in the original signal, and that creates the tone and timbre. So why does a flute sound so different from a clarinet, even though it's possible to play some of the same fundamental notes?
Right.
It's all the harmonics. That's what gives it its timbre. That's what lets you identify it as one instrument or another. And speakers have a similar thing.
And one's made of metal, one's made of wood.
Right. But that's the harmonics.
It depends on which wood you use too. I mean, which
so
metal
if your speakers are imparting as much coloration to the sound as a flute does to the fundamental note, so like an oboe has very little harmonics added to the sound. That's why it's used to be the tone that all the other instruments are tuned to.
Tuned to, yeah.
Because it's a very pure, almost pure sine wave tone coming out of an oboe. That same fundamental note can be played by lots of other instruments in the orchestra, but they have lots of coloration to their sound, lots of harmonics. If your speaker is imparting that kind of coloration to all the sound, it's not a very good speaker. You'd want to avoid that, but you would definitely notice that it has a change in timbre that EQ cannot fix.
I just want to point out that I was joking about the fact that the different metals. And
I know.
I'm not telling you. I know you know. But there's somebody on that's listening to this podcast that's like, I knew that the different
metal drivers.
Metal drivers.
Gotta have paper drivers.
Well, we had that guy just a couple of weeks ago who was like, oh yeah, we make our speakers out of the same wood they make violins out of.
That's right, yeah. Yeah,
guitars. Make it out of guitars, whatever it was. So he asks, lastly, is this Brandon still? I think is the $1,000 or so difference in price between Elite screens, acoustically transparent motorized projection screens, and Seymour AV screens really noticeable and worth it? How close are you sitting to them? Because that's one of the things. Seymour AV screens their weave is extremely tight and it's almost imperceptible at any distance that you would normally sit from, no matter how big you like your screens. Elite screens, their weave is, it's good.
It's good, but not quite as tight. Good. And there's a little bit of color shift in the Elite screens, but that's generally not a problem because you can usually calibrate around it with your projector. The build quality, there are differences, to be sure. Yeah, I mean, I like to recommend the Elite screens when someone's like, here's the budget I got, here's what I really, really want to do. And it's like, well, you can. You can. If you have the money available, I think the Seymour AV screens are worth it. I think the build quality, the no color shift, the really tight weave, these are really nice things to have if it's not going to strain your budget. If it's really going to strain your budget, don't kill yourself over it. Don't do that. But if it's easily affordable, then I'd say yes, it's worth it.
Well, that's what it comes down to. How important is it to you? I've got people that are like, I mean, as we've mentioned on this podcast over and over again, there's tons of people out there that have no idea what Atmos is.
Sure.
To those people, you can make it the world's cheapest Atmos speaker, and they'd be like, I don't want to pay for it because it's not worth it to me. And if it's important to you to have the premium screen with no color shift and knowing that you've got a very tight weave and fantastic build quality, then the $1,000 is going to be worth it to you. If having, and this is the camp I'm in most of the time, if having a screen that's very good is good enough for you, then the Elite screens is kind of okay, and that $1,000 is not worth it. Robert in Australia. So Robert ordered the NVIDIA Shield from Amazon USA since they're strangely hard to find in Australia. That's because they ship everything there on humpback whale. We all know it. There's no excuse for how long it takes things to get to Australia. They ship it from China. China's right there. And yet, I swear they ship it from China to America and America back to that. It just makes no sense. At the time he wrote to us, he hadn't received it yet, but started poking around online and got a bit scared when he read some of the problems people seem to be having. Don't ever do the thing that Robert has done. But anyways, here we go. He has his content stored on a Synology NAS, or network accessible storage. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Usually say network attached storage, but accessible is fine.
That NAS actually has a Plex server app available, but its processor isn't really up to the task of transcoding videos on the fly. So we was looking forward to the NVIDIA Shield being a better Plex server. But then he read some issues with using the Shield with a NAS, particularly things like loss of connection issues when either the Shield or the NAS idles to sleep. So the experience or tips about that. This is all Rob questions. This You have Synology, don't you have Synology?
I do have a Synology NAS.
So
yes.
you are a perfect person, but you don't have an NVIDIA though.
I don't have a Shield right now. Nope. But I've played around with so Paul has one. I've played around with his. Brought over some hard drives, did some experiments.
Yeah.
So I've heard about these problems. I mean, honestly, your computer can sometimes have connection problems to the NAS as well.
Sure.
And it usually does have to do with that sleep cycle, or if you set up the NAS to do automatic updates. Sure. Sometimes after that's happened, you need to do a reboot cycle and reconnect over the network. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a pain sometimes. To have it working as smoothly as possible, you can set the NVIDIA Shield to not idle to sleep. It's hidden under its screensaver setting.
Yeah.
Under the screensaver setting, you can say, don't go to sleep. So that's one thing. And honestly, letting it not go to sleep does not burn a ton more power. Burn a little bit more power, but really not very much more. So I'm not worried about that. And if you want to use it as a Plex server, especially a remote Plex server where you can you're out and about and you can access your Plex server on your mobile device, it's very nice to not let your NVIDIA Shield go to sleep. And it is a much better Plex server. I was really impressed by how quickly it skipped through videos. All my other Plex servers, even my fairly powerful PC, there's a buffering, you skip around and there's some buffering. The NVIDIA Shield was like lickety split, instantaneous. So I was impressed by that. And a similar thing on the NAS. Usually, I don't like to just let my hard drive spin forever. I do prefer to let them idle to sleep. But there is a delay where they have to spin up. So one little trick I'll use is if I know it's been overnight, definitely my hard drives are asleep now, I will say within Plex, okay, start playing, and then I will immediately back out. And when I've sent that start playing command, that's enough to get the NAS to wake up and start spinning up the hard drives. And then I wait the 30 seconds or so for the hard drives to be spun up, and then I start playing again. Because if you just hit play and leave it, it'll be like, I can't find the NAS because the hard drives haven't spun up yet. And then you have to do a whole back out and usually close down Plex and reopen it, and that's a pain. Or if you say play and then you back out and then you don't let them spin up and you play again, you get like a dual conflicting I got this signal twice thing. So there are hassles to it. There's some things to be aware of. So if you really want the easiest thing, never let your NAS auto update and never let the hard drives go to sleep. And never let your Shield go to sleep. Then things work pretty darn smoothly. Yeah.
So he was hoping the Shield could deliver Netflix in 4K with HDR and Atmos, but apparently the Shield's Netflix app doesn't even pass Atmos, even though the hardware itself can do it. Is that something that might be enabled with an app update?
Yes.
Well, yeah, basically that's exactly what's going to have to happen with Netflix. Whoever is supporting that app, that just takes some time to get everything up and going. And I would imagine NVIDIA Shield would be one of the ones sooner rather than later is going to get.
I hope so.
All of the updates that it needs.
Yeah, it was the case with Plex as well. The original Plex app on the NVIDIA Shield wouldn't pass Atmos bit streams. But then Plex did a software update to their app once the NVIDIA Shield was firmware updated to be able to output Atmos, and then it worked. So yeah, Netflix has to update their NVIDIA Shield app. That's what needs to happen.
So he knows the Shield does not support Dolby Vision, but is there any chance it could with a future update? Is Dolby Vision hardware? I didn't think it was hardware. I thought it was software.
There is a software version. That's what Sony's using, which is causing all the problems for everybody. Since there is a software version of Dolby Vision, and the NVIDIA Shield should definitely be powerful enough to do it.
Sure.
It should be possible. Whether it'll happen before the next hardware iteration of the Shield, I have no idea. But technically, it should be possible.
Okay. So any other setup tips? Oh, wait. Will he need to set the region to work in Australia?
Well, kind of. But once you connect it to the internet, it'll do it automatically. So
Yeah. So any other setup tips, he asks, while I adjust my...
Just something to be aware of. At the moment, the Shield does not automatically switch itself between SDR and HDR. So if you want to watch something in HDR, you're going to go into the video output settings and put it into HDR mode. And then when you go back to watching something in SDR, you will manually go back in and set its video output settings to SDR. It doesn't auto switch. Hopefully that's something NVIDIA has said they're working on. So they're aware of it, much like how so Apple managed to bring that update out quickly. NVIDIA is taking a little longer, but they're aware of it. It's just something to know.
All right. Alvin. So Alvin stumbled across Paul McGowan's YouTube Q&A videos. He's the CEO and founder of PS Audio, which is they have
esoteric.
They have very pretty components. I really like the way their components look.
Okay.
Alvin isn't sure how he feels about Paul's answer, so he wanted to ask us what we think. In particular, Alvin has just replaced his speaker wire with generic 14 gauge bulk cables, so he keyed in on one of Paul's videos about speaker wire. In this specific case, he was answering questions about why internal wire you find if you open up a speaker is often much thinner than the garden hoses that audiophiles use between their amps and their speakers. Paul really didn't provide much of an answer when he says so himself in the video, but he insists that the internal wire that is used does matter and it does impact the sound, and that in his experience, 12 or even 16 gauge wire between the crossover and a single driver seems to sound just fine, but that he's also used Cardus and Audio Quest wires internally on some of his speaker designs because they made a difference. What are our thoughts? Bull malarkey is what but my thoughts are.
Speaker wire that Audio Quest and Cardass and other companies like Transparent and stuff, the speaker wire they make is
they're EQs. Yeah,
it's so bad that it could impact the sound.
Yeah.
Bad is a judgment, but I don't think a speaker wire should alter the electrical signal by having such high resistance, inductance, or capacitance that it acts as a passive EQ. I don't think a speaker wire should do that. Some speaker wires do. Yeah. So that would impact the sound. You can't say that it's impossible for it to impact the sound. It can, but I don't think it should. And yes, just some generic, like 16 gauge wire for the, maybe 6 inches of length between the crossover and the woofer or something. That'll be fine. That'll be so way stupid. More than fine.
It's just so stupid. It's just this. I mean, he's fighting with himself, I think, because he's trying to. He knows that what his customers want him to say is that internal wires, the wires are important. That these big, thick wires make a huge difference because that's what everybody says, and that there should be big wires inside the speakers.
Yeah.
But he can't say that because then if anybody opens any speaker that he's ever designed and it doesn't have garden hoses in it, then they're going to be like, dude, what are you talking about? You just said that it makes a difference. And he can't say it. He can't say it.
I mean, it's like the aftermarket power cord people, for the 3 feet between the outlet and their wall and their component makes all the difference, even though they still just have 14.2 Romex inside their wall like everybody else. Yeah.
So it's garbage. I mean, I'm sorry to say that it is, in that.
No, we don't need to leave this in uncertain terms.
I want to believe that these people honestly believe what they're saying, but I gotta believe on some level they're like, I'm just trying to sell my products, and my customers expect certain things, and if I throw the wire manufacturers underneath the bus, then they are no longer going to, I mean, all he's got to do is sell a couple of components, because everything he has costs way more than anything could possibly. There's no amount of components you can put into a box that costs as much as what these guys are selling you. So they don't have to sell that many, but that means that one customer loss it can really hurt. So, I want to believe that they're good people, but a part of me knows that they just can't be. They can't be. They can't be.
I could never do what they do.
Yeah.
It's not something I'm not capable of willfully saying things that I know to be false. Yeah.
There's just no way that the wire can make a difference. It just can't.
That.
It can't. Not the way that people in the audiophile community say that it can. It literally cannot. You cannot take a wire and have it pass the signal in such a way that it is somehow better than regular wire. It can be different, but it cannot be better.
There's screw it up.
Better.
You can
mess it up.
Yep.
And you can mess it up in a way that's pleasing when paired with other things that are also screwing it up, which is basically the entire audiophile community. That is what they do. They buy an amp that's not linear. They pair it with a speaker wire that affects the sound, and then they put it with a speaker that's one stupid driver and a big folded horn. And then they're like, well, when I changed the speaker wire, it made a difference to the sound. I'm like, of course it did. Everything in your system is garbage. It's really expensive garbage, but it is garbage. But hey, you've got that little tiny clock at the back of your room, so now your system sounds way better. Don't get me started on the clever clock. Chris on Twitter. 2 weeks ago, Chris shared a photo of all the AVRant recommended gear he'd bought. There's a big pile of it in the corner.
There was.
This week, he's got his projection screen mounted on his wall and his BenQ 2150 short throw projector installed. He knows the top and left sides appear to be perfectly aligned, but there's a bit of blank space between the edges of the image and the frame on the right side and the bottom. So the top and left side, but the right side and the bottom. Anyways, okay.
It's just it's not perfectly aligned to the frame. Image is not perfectly aligned to the frame. Yeah.
The projector only has keystone correction, and that didn't solve it. What's the fix? Then you gotta move your projector, dude. I mean, it's got, that's what it is, right? You got to move your projector. It's got to be perfectly aligned because it's a short throw projector. There's
particularly with a short throw, very tiny movements are exaggerated to a large degree with any projector, but especially with a short throw projector.
Well, without having any sort of lens shift or anything like that, I mean, it should tell you in the setup, you need to be exactly this and exactly this from the screen.
Yeah, so I mean, there's multiple things. So first of all, if you've mounted your screen to the wall, nothing says your wall is perfectly flat, and nothing says your screen is perfectly square and plumb. It's possible for that.
And not only that, it's not perfectly vertical either. There might be a little bit of a lean or a,
so getting a projector perfectly aligned is easier said than done, to be sure. But in an example like this, where you have just a little tiny gap, essentially in the bottom right corner, that's where all of this is going.
And if you're watching the YouTube video, you can see it. It's right by where it says select and move over there. There's a little bit of a thing.
So what you would do in a case like this, so anytime a little bit of the image is slightly smaller than the frame, it means that that side of the projector is a teeny bit farther away from the screen than the opposite side.
Yeah.
So in a case like this, what you would want to do is when it's the bottom right corner that's not quite filling the frame, it means you would turn the projector like a hair. I'm talking a teeny tiny little bit to the left. Yes, because right now the right side of the screen is slightly farther away than the left side.
Okay, yes.
So you turn it a tiny little bit to the left, and you would tilt it a tiny bit, up? Because right now down.
Down, because it's the bottom right corner.
No, right now the bottom of the screen is slightly farther away. No, slightly closer. Yeah, slightly closer. Yeah, so you tilt it a little bit down. Yeah. And then you might find that you have a little bit of overshoot, which is actually preferable to not completely filling the screen.
Yeah. That's what the whole black velvet thing is around the screen, so that you can overshoot it slightly.
Yeah. You know what? I think I said that backwards. I might not have, but I might have. So just to clarify, if it's smaller, then it's a little bit closer, right? Because if you pull back, the image gets bigger.
Right.
So anytime you pull a projector back from the screen, it gets bigger. So, just think of it that way. If it's a little too small, it needs to be a little bit farther away. If it's a little too big, it needs to be a little bit closer.
Yeah. So the APC J25 battery backup has a master power button on the front. Is he supposed to turn it off whenever he isn't using it? Is it okay to leave it on all the time? Should leave it on all the time.
Yep. Leave it on all the time.
Damien says we've convinced. This is James again, isn't it?
Poor Damien.
How the heck did I do that? That's like so.
Because it was on your mind. It was you had said James a bunch of times prior, so it was on your mind.
I say a lot of things. Whatever. James says we've convinced him. He's going to hold off on his amplifier purchase and speaker upgrade until he's actually in his new house and knows exactly what he needs. He might upgrade his Onkyo 646 receiver, though. He could move the Onkyo into his bedroom and grab a refurbished X4300H from One Call while they still have them in stock. So that's his gear purchasing update.
Should I throw a wrench into it and say the monoprice monolith B stock might not be here for that much longer?
Oh, whatever. Don't confuse James Damien.
I know.
Call him JD. He also heard us discussing speaker tone and optimizing the phantom center effect. His towers were about 9 feet apart, and he said 7 feet away. He was surprised at just how a few degrees of tone made a big difference and made him keep getting up to put his ear against the center speaker to make sure it wasn't playing and to make sure his receiver wasn't just in stereo listening mode.
It was just in stereo.
Just in stereo listening mode. His towers are the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers. They're kind of short, not just aesthetically, but since he was listening critically during his tone experiments, he knows that they sounded best if you lowered the height of his head. So it's an inexpensive DIY way to raise them. They only need to be about 4 to 6 inches taller. We mentioned cinder blocks, and those seemed like a good idea, but then Tom said they attract spiders. Again, don't remember saying that. And that they would not fly. Anything else we suggest? I'm okay with cinder blocks. Just put a piece of fabric over them.
Oh, yeah. No, Tom was saying if you have cinder blocks laying around and you have them outside, then spiders are going to be in there. But the mere presence of cinder blocks within your house is not going to make spiders magically appear.
No.
I'm
okay with that. I'm also okay with just getting a little a couple of pieces of 4x6 or 4x something, 4x4 by whatever, and
a little piece of plywood on top,
or something.
A very simple base. Again, throw a piece of fabric over it, and no one will know what's under the fabric.
Yeah.
So a very cheap DIY. Yeah, I'd probably just do it with some blocks of wood.
Yeah, that's probably what I would do. I would literally go into my garage and find stuff. I would have old textbooks. I would do the whole thing. I would go find some of my old psychology textbooks, be like,
those Pioneer Andrew Jones towers aren't that heavy, like a stack of DVD cases or something.
Yeah. So what's some good demo material to test panning and circling effects? Well, apparently The Shape of Water is real nice.
Yeah.
According to Damien. So
what? Oh man,
Jonathan.
That was according to Jonathan. We're talking about Damien right now. Jonathan was the one who said The Shape of Water.
We're talking about JD. Yeah. So that's good. I wish I could remember the name of that horror movie I was watching. That it was like Last Night or something like that. Last Call. No, it wasn't Last Call. It was about a female cop. She was her first day on the job, and she was at a police station that they were retiring. The movie's garbage.
Oh, the really bad one.
It is garbage. It is so bad. Like, do not go all the way through this movie. Get to the part where there's like sounds going on and she's sitting find that part and then listen to that. That's really good. The Doc Ock scene from Spider-Man 2 is a well-known usage of surround effects. I'm trying to think if there's it seems like there was like a woodland elf part of one of the Fellowship of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings movies, where she was like coming from different sides.
Been so darn many of those.
I know, I can't remember.
I will say the first Avengers movie. That's no spoilers for the current one. The first Avengers movie, The Battle in New York, has some really good circling pans going on in it.
Yep.
X-Men. Almost all the X-Men movies, actually, at some point, do some really good sound.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say effects. Professor X, anytime he's talking in your head, he usually...
not First Class, but the one that came right after that.
The one where Wolverine went back in time because Kitty Pryde doesn't sell movies as much as...
The Days of Future Past.
The
whole Quicksilver scene.
Yes.
Lots of stuff moving around in that scene.
Yeah.
There you go. That should be a smattering.
So he still has the 8-inch Pioneer subwoofer on hand. He replaced it with his dual SVS SB12 NSD subs in his theater. But if he moves his Onkyo receiver to his bedroom, he figured he can use the Pioneer sub in there, at least for a while. Sure. The Pioneer sub has a front port, and the tube inside is just a piece of cardboard. It looks as though the cardboard tube was just glued to the plastic port opening, and it has shaken loose. A local repair shop wanted $50 just to look at it. Damien feels confident enough in his own abilities to unscrew the driver and reattach the cardboard tube himself. What should he use? Some sort of epoxy? Yes, hot glue. I would probably start with hot glue.
Hot glue. Well, it was funny because he was describing. He's like, "Yeah, what they use to attach it, it looks like it's kind of clear and like not totally hard." I'm like, "Yeah, that's hot glue." They just hot glued some cardboard to a piece of plastic. Yeah. That was what they did. It'd be fine.
I don't see any. If you've got, just make sure whatever you're using bonds well to cardboard and plastic. That's the only thing you really have to check. Some adhesives, especially epoxies, aren't appropriate for all surfaces, so they won't stick to all surfaces. So you have to check that.
But on it, hot glue's the easiest, man.
I would hot glue.
Really is. Yeah.
I would put a lot of hot glue on it. And yeah,
don't go too nuts. But
I'll tell you what, man. I would absolutely 100% tell you to do this yourself. $50 is ridiculous.
Oh yeah. I mean,
there's no reason you can't take that driver out, and that 8-inch hole is big enough to get your hand and everything else in there. So
yeah,
you should be able to take the port out as well. There should be some sort of attachment.
You could use silicone like you would in a, like in a bathroom. Like
you could do that
in your bathroom. But I'll bet you the tube of that costs more than it'd really be worth just to do this.
Well, you can usually get the small tubes too.
That's true.
Like the touch-up stuff. Josh has a dedicated theater room, completely light controlled, with a flat panel mounted on the front wall and his seats close to the back wall about 14 feet away. That must be a monster flat panel. He wants to install an acoustically transparent motorized screen that can come down in front of his flat panel. Good idea. And he'd like the screen to be recessed into a ceiling, which is 9 feet high. He's thinking he'd probably go for a 120-inch 16:9 screen, and he wants to be able to control the screen with his Harmony Elite remote. The total budget for the screen project and projector is $6,000 with wiggle room up to $7,000. What do we, if we think it's really worth it? What screen do we suggest? Okay, so are you like super duper dedicated into recessing this into your ceiling, or is it okay for you?
That is a question. Yeah.
Okay for you to put some to mask it off in some way, because if it's okay for you to mask it off in some way, it's probably much more viable. And the reason why is because you have your whole theater set up. You're ready to go. Everything's ready to go. What direction are your joists going?
Yeah,
you don't know
very important.
What direction your joists are going. Because if they're going the wrong way, this went from being a projector installed to like reframing your ceiling in order to make this thing work. So that $6,000 is gone just in trying to get the thing up there.
Definitely do not restructure all the ceiling joists in your house for this. That would not be worth it. Yeah, no, I mean, my first thought is to go for a traditional case, because you can get ones like you can get them like the same color as your ceiling. So like, yes, there's a case hanging down from your ceiling, but it's camouflaged.
For me, I mean, he wants $6,000, right? So let's say $6,000. $6,000. I mean, if you just put like a false ceiling that comes out a certain amount that has molding around it, whatever the molding is at the top of your ceiling, I mean, it would look like just like anything else because it'd be right at the front of the wall. Just have it go all the way across the front of your wall, and just have it bump out enough to cover up your projector, and then have the projector drop down right through it, and then you could put lights in it and everything. I mean, you could make it all look like it was done. Now, how much would that cost? Well, I don't know, dude. Are you handy? Can you do it yourself? Because I can't. And but most of the my guess would be without you having to add anything electrical to it, if you just wanted to get some sort of 2-foot bump in from your ceiling that was about maybe 6 inches deep, down from the ceiling, so 2 feet out from the wall, 6 inches down from the ceiling. I'm guessing you could probably get that done for. If you budgeted $500 for it, you would have money left over.
Oh yeah, that's some pretty simple woodworking for any.
Well, and just a little drywall, a little woodworking, and it's cosmetic. You don't have to have any permitting for it. I really don't see that being much of an issue. That is the solution for I want it recessed into my ceiling. Almost certainly, because chances are your ceiling, I mean, if your luck is anything like mine, there's no way those joists are going the right way. It's just not happening.
If you move in the future, you can take that projector screen with you, whereas if it's installed in your ceiling, that's going to be a hassle to take that with you. So assuming you go with all that advice and just have one that is attached to your ceiling rather than actually being recessed into it, I would point you to Seymour AV for sure, because you want motorized, acoustically transparent. Seymour AV for sure. They do custom make in-ceiling ones, but usually through their Seymour Screen Excellence division, which is custom install.
Right.
So if you're dead set on this, you've already checked that the ceiling joists are going the correct way, you're dead set on an in-ceiling recessed one, and you just want to order one that you can install yourself, Illusion does offer that. So they're quite comparable to Seymour AV. I have zero qualms recommending their acoustically transparent screen, and they do have recessed in-ceiling, tab-tensioned, acoustically transparent, really tight audio weave. So I'd send you over there. Though for 120 inches, I could only, being in Canada, what came up quickly were the Canadian prices, so it was about $2,500 Canadian, which should be.
I'm trying to find that price right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it should be under $2,000 American, just given the exchange rate. They do have a warehouse in California. Illusion Vision does.
What does he want? 120.
120 is what he's going for. Which is actually a good size given the projector I'm going to recommend. So, I'm assuming it's going to be about $2,000 either way, leaving you $4,000 in your budget, which means you could get the JVC X590 right now, or you could do what we've been suggesting pretty much this whole time, which is if you can wait for CEDIA, there might be something really exciting announced there that you want to get instead. Or at the very least, the current models are going to go down in price, meaning you could get an X790 probably within your budget.
Yeah.
At that time,
as far as controlling with your Harmony remote, this shouldn't be an issue. All you have to do is
easy for both.
Yeah. All these screens have IR
and RF
and RF stuff that you can program into the Harmony.
Yeah,
I don't know the RF, but the RF probably doesn't work. The IR will for sure. So his home theater system is 5.2.4. He has a 4.1 living room system using a Phantom Center. All of his wiring for both systems run back to a centralized media closet. And he has one monolith 5-channel amp, apparently like unicorns these days. He has 2 of the monolith's channels to power the front, left, and right speakers in his living room, and the remaining 3 amp channels to power his left, center, and right in his home theater. Is there any downside to this or reason he shouldn't do it? Nope. Just fine.
Totally fine. I mean, the only potential downside is that if you're really miserly about your electricity bill, you're going to have that amp powered on whether you're listening in the living room or the home theater.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's no performance downside of it. Totally fine. I did just want to mention, he asked how far back he should mount his projector. The JVCs, because you're probably going to end up with a JVC given your budget. The JVCs have a pretty long throw. Okay. So for the 120-inch size that you want, I believe they have to be about, the lens we're talking about has to be about a little over 12 feet back. You can look it up on Projector Central's projection calculator. But given that your room's just a little over 14 feet long, you basically want a rear shelf.
Yeah.
There's no problem with it being farther back. You've got lots of lens shift, lens zoom range on those JVC projectors for it to be
a low window in that room.
Yeah, so basically you want it right on the back wall, because the projector itself, of course, is over a foot long. So you want it right up against that back wall, basically.
Nathan says, somewhat revisiting a previous question about some disc releases that are listing their soundtracks as 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos rather than Dolby Atmos. There's a whole thread about it at the AVS forum.
Shocker.
Yes, I'm sure it's full of it's like one question, one answer, and everybody's like happy, right? It's like 300 pages of people saying the same thing over and over again. Anyways, and now that the number of people, and now that a number of people have the 13-channel Denon X8500H or one of the other processors that can do 9.1.6 or more, there are some interesting reports. Apparently, there are some releases. Wonder Woman is a key example, where even with a Trinnov Altitude 32, the only speakers that produce any sound are the 7 traditional forward-level speakers and the top fronts and top rears. Apparently, front wide or additional four-level speakers are only used for Atmos objects. So if all the floor-level sounds are strictly encoded in as channels, no objects. And then the traditional 7 floor-level speakers are the only ones that will play any sounds. All of the overhead sounds are encoded as objects for the home version of Atmos. But in the case of a mix like Wonder Woman's, what seems to have happened is that they've just picked 4 sets of coordinates that correspond to the top, front, and top rear locations, and they basically mix sounds into those 4 static locations as if they were channels. Yep. So bottom line, if you have 6 overhead speakers, the top middles remain silent. At first, people assumed that 7.1.4 Atmos in the back of the box was like a new shorthand to indicate that all sounds treated like channels type of mixing. But then Thor Ragnarok came out with 7.1.4 Atmos listed in the back of the box, but people confirmed that the floor level seems to be strictly channels. The overhead sounds weren't strictly locked in the top front and top rear speakers, so nothing ever came out of the front wides, but sometimes top middle speakers did make sounds. Unlike Wonder Woman's, what do they make of all of this? I don't know. It's a new format, and you know, and you know, as these receivers are coming out with their more speakers than anybody ever thought possible, there's going to be some decoding issues, and will they get fixed? Why are they still using channels at the why isn't the Atmos not object based all the way around? That's the real question.
It could be, yeah. Though this is the unfortunate thing. So I mean, really, what's happened here is you've got some mixers and sound mastering engineers and that who simply cannot think in terms other than channels.
Right.
So, with a case like Wonder Woman, so I mean, when there's a guy with an altitude 32 and he's like, I've put my ear up against every speaker and only 11 out of my 24 speakers are actually making any sound. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty compelling evidence.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm really not going to doubt that. And there is entirely a technical way that this could be done, which is that, yeah, you don't move any of the objects around. You don't give them any metadata other than here are 4 static locations that I've chosen, which correspond to where the top fronts and top rears would be. And I'm just going to put sounds in there as if it were a channel.
Right.
That you totally could do that. And yeah, I imagine that's exactly what they've done. That's really unfortunate. But what that is a sound mixer or a sound mastering engineer who just can't think in the new way, who
right.
can't think object-based. They're like, all I understand is channels, so that's really unfortunate. I'm really sad to see that, but it's not the fault of Atmos, and it's not the fault of any of these 13 or 16 or 32 channel processors.
If your object is directly inside the location of the speaker, Atmos is not going to hand that out to the rest of the speakers because there's no reason to do so.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they've done. They've set those 4 objects where they are, this, in this case, the 11 objects where they are.
Yeah.
And as channels.
Yeah, and even if you're panning sounds, if the way you're panning it is only via volume, like
right.
you would with a channel-based system, instead of saying, what I can do is use my mouse to drag that object in the panning motion that I want, and all of that will be stored as cool metadata, which if this person has 10 speakers on their ceiling, they can use all 10 of them. They're not thinking that way. They're just like, I just want to work in channels. So, I don't think it'll stay this way forever. I think eventually people will learn how to use audio objects because that is the future. The future is audio objects. I have no doubt of that. But there's people that just aren't used to it yet.
The person who went around and put their head up next to all the speakers was weird to begin with.
Yeah, but I appreciate that.
I do too, but that's still weird. I appreciate it though, because I'm glad to know.
Maybe the best way to do 9.1.6 is with 4 AV receivers matrixing it, because if they're matrixing it, they'll put sounds in there even without objects. There you go.
Stop it. Stop telling people to buy 3 receivers. It's just ridiculous.
4 receivers.
It's just so weird. Will says, long time, first time. So I guess long time listener, first time writer.
That's correct.
He's got a 5.1.2 set up using a Marantz SR6012 Martin Logan Motion Series speakers, tower fronts, tower surrounds, and center, and a pair of Polk in-ceiling speakers directly above his seats as top middles. His Sunfire subwoofer died on him, so he's temporarily using a 10-inch Polk sub borrowed from his computer room, and due to the space constraints, he keeps the sub behind the seats on the back wall. His theater area is 13.5 feet by 13 feet, so a square. And it's all open on the left side to his stairs, and then the kitchen and the dining, so it's a bajillion square feet. And the floor is tile, so he's doing his best to cut down some of the reflections with a big rug and heavy coverings over his windows. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing pictures here. Mm-hmm. He does have very heavy coverings, and it's got what looks to be the world's thickest rug. I mean, it almost looks like it has a shadow. I mean, it looks like it has a shadow. It's very thick.
But I appreciate that. That's a way to hide some absorption in your room without it, looking completely out of place.
So he's got it looks like a dual recliner here, sitting in front of a flat panel screen, which is raised up a little bit, and he's sitting awful close, which is good because it isn't the biggest screen, but it probably gives him a pretty decent field of view. So here we go. And by the way, I like your tile. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's time to buy a sub or 2, but he's having trouble deciding. He listens to quite a bit of music, so he was directed towards REL by forum people, no doubt.
Or salespeople. Could be
But
salespeople.
then we've talked so much about SVS that he's leaning towards them also. His theater area is small, but it's open. So does he need to consider, say, the 4,000 series, or would the 2,000 series be fine? You're not going to pressurize this whole space. That's just not something you're going to
probably inadvisable. That's going to be some rattling dishes if you do.
Yeah. So your subs are going to be, by definition, close to you.
Yes.
So I have no problems with you going with a slightly smaller sub, trying that will not pressurize the space, but will do an awfully good job of rattling you around that room. So the
you'll hear it, you'll feel it. It just won't be the full pressurization, which I do not think you want. I doubt there's a some kind of thing closing off the top of these stairs, because this doesn't look like it's a basement to a first floor. It looks like it's a first floor to a second floor.
Yeah.
So I imagine you are open to your entire second floor as well. So right. Yeah, you're not going to pressurize this space. That doesn't mean you can't hear and get like the kick in your chest type of tactile without having to get a sub that can pressurize the entire space.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I got no problems with you getting the 2000 series. I think that'll be fine.
Yes. Yes, I think so.
So ported versus sealed, how different would they actually sound?
Now, see, here is where the size of the room comes back into play for me.
So the ported one will, by definition, be louder, which means that it will be able to give you more sound within this room. Now, if you were to take, in my opinion, and I think this is true, if you were to take them, the 2000 ported one, the 2000 non-ported one, you put them in an anechoic chamber and you listen to them in that anechoic chamber, they would sound the same.
Over most of the frequency range, yes.
Yeah, the ported one's going to play a little bit lower.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're going to sound basically the same. So in your room, though, if you can go ports, go ports.
Yes.
Which is going to mean that in your room, you're going to want to get the PC 2000. If you can.
The cylinder would be great because it would save you on floor space, or you could lay it down on its side behind your couch,
which would work fine too.
So I like the cylinder here. The PC 2000 would be a very nice choice, but I would go ported in your situation because you do not have the enclosed room.
Yeah.
And so if you were to listen to a sweep of the sealed one versus the ported one, the sealed one would gradually start to get quieter and quieter, up around 35, 40 hertz. It would start to get quieter as you get lower and lower, and that's what you would hear just coming out of the sub all by itself. Whereas the ported one will be pretty darn linear all the way down to 20 hertz, and then it'll drop off quite steeply below that.
Right.
If you're in a small enclosed room, the room will boost up the lowest frequencies with room gain. So a sealed sub matches a sealed room really nicely. But you've got a wide open space. So you want the sub itself to remain linear all the way down to 20 hertz, and then it's fine if it drops off. That way, you're going to hear linear sound.
Right. So he's got 5.1.2 right now, and this SR6012 has 9.
We missed the placement one.
What? No, every once in a while I scroll, and then I think I haven't scrolled, and I scroll again. So if you were to get two subs, the only places you could put them would be on the back wall and on the right side wall. Would that still be worth it? This is with this open space right here, we can't tell you.
The answer is we don't know for sure.
First of all, I would buy one. I would put it in both spaces,
right,
and then decide, does that sound really good to me? And if it sounds really good to me, I would stop.
Yeah.
Then if you think that it sounds uneven and you're looking for more even bass, you then call SVS and you say, I already bought one. Can I get the deal for the second one? Because they give you a price break on getting two. It's not a lot. It's like $100 or something like that. But you get a price break on buying two, and they will give you that price break. They give it to everybody. This is not us giving you some sort of secret deal. AV Rant, mention us and you get like money off your. That's not how it works. But they will send you that whatever, and then you get your second one, and then you're going to have to try to figure out how to, and we can talk about that later, but about how to put them in those two spots and try to make them sound better than just one.
Yeah, with a wide open and irregular shape like this, because we don't know what's going on at the top of those stairs or whatever, there's no way to predict ahead of time. It's entirely possible that one sub will get you pretty uniform sounding bass in here, because with a wide open space like this, very often the case.
Yeah.
But we don't know for sure. So yeah, I agree. Start with one, try it in both spots. If you don't get satisfying results, then we'll talk about two.
So he's got a 5.1.2 right now. His SR6012 has 9 amps built in. He doesn't want to put any more speakers in or on the ceilings. So he sees two options. He could put a pair of speakers up high on his front wall and call them front heights. Or since the seats are fairly close to his back wall and the back wall has windows, he could put speakers up high above the windows on his back walls and call them either surround backs or rear heights. He could potentially go crazy and add a 2-channel amp for a 7.2.4 setup. But in reality, what do we think would be his best option to have the biggest audible impact? Let me look at this room again real quick. I got to scroll back up.
I mean, to me, the obvious answer is front heights on your front wall.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll be honest. I put front heights on my front wall, and I never noticed the difference.
I know.
It's just audible. I never noticed it. So the biggest audible impact, getting the SVS up.
But the sub will make a big difference.
After that, I would put them. I guess I would put them up high on the back wall and kind of aim them down and call them. I guess I would call them top. I mean, how far into the room can you cheat them? Like how big of a shelf can you put back there to do this? Can you call them top middles? Or is it that close?
He's already got top middles.
Oh, he's got top middles.
He's already got those.
I forgot he's got top
those.
Those
are already right above his seat. I mean, I like having 4 overheads just because if there are front to back pans, now you can do that. You can't do front to back pans with only 2 speakers above you. So, like I say, the obvious choice is front heights, but I don't disagree with Tom. The number of times that you really notice your front heights is pretty low.
Yeah, I don't think you should do this. I think you should just stick with what you got. I think you get the subs and then don't worry about the top fronts. You can test it out. If you've got the speakers, you could test it out. But I don't know that I would invest more money in
hang all your hopes on that.
Yeah, I think you're going to end up being
front heights would be the obvious choice. Yeah.
So he's got polka and ceiling speakers before he got his Martin Logan Motion Series set up. Would it be worth the rather high cost of replacing the polks with Martin Logan in ceiling speakers?
I got a super complicated answer for this.
Okay, I think I got the same one. Mm-hmm. Is it no?
No.
Yeah, that's my super complicated answer too. Yeah. I can't imagine
that. It's going to be tough to sort through that and parse it.
You could, if you want to, Rob will write you a short diatribe about it on email. Because he will. I can't imagine that the Atmos speakers, that changing them will do. If you're getting sound out of them, then you're getting everything you need out of Atmos
kind of the case. Yeah. No, this is not worth that, because the Martin Logan in ceiling speakers are not cheap.
No,
so
they're like,
it is not worth it for that.
No, I don't think so. Jeremy. I think I'm saying that right. Jeremy, that's what it looks like. When Jeremy and his wife had their living room home theater installed, they opted for a 7.2.4 configuration using all in-walls and in-ceiling speakers, even the subs. Flash forward to today, and Jeremy is regretting that decision a little bit. The in-ceiling speakers, especially the subs, vibrate enough that their brackets and the walls themselves also vibrate, and they get some buzzing that hasn't been able to fully eliminate. And being on an exterior wall, they also conduct some sound from outside, like noises from his gutters. Well, then that's special. God.
Slightly less than ideal, I would agree.
I would just like, oh my. So what am I looking at these pictures here?
Okay, so the front wall there, you've got a screen that's like kind of embedded in the wall. And then
strange, yeah.
Left, center, right speakers above that screen, slightly angled. So like the wall itself has been built with a slight angle to it.
Right.
So that they're angled down. And then the 2 boxes on the bottom beside the screen are the in-wall subwoofers. And then the other image we're looking at is the in-ceiling layout, which is, so the 2 that are widest apart are the surrounds. The 2 at the farthest to the right of the image are the surround backs, and then there are 4 Atmos as well. So there's 8 speakers in the ceiling, in-ceiling surrounds, in-ceiling surround backs, and 4 Atmos speakers up there. Plus some can lights.
I have no idea what you just said. What are the ones that are widest apart? Those are the surrounds?
Those are the surrounds.
And then the 4 that are inside those are the Atmos. They're like 3 feet apart.
No. So left to right is front to back in the image.
I get it. But like the surrounds and the Atmos speakers are not that far apart from
They're
each
not
other.
terribly, and the surround backs are definitely not very far either.
No, they're all like right there in the vicinity. Like I'm not going to say that they're not properly located as far as in relation to,
yeah, if you just looked at a diagram, you're like, yeah, that's kind of where they would go if they all had to be in the ceiling.
Yeah. I might have given them a little bit more room, but whatever. So he's considered switching out the in-wall speakers at the front of his room for regular in-room speakers, but he's debating the best approach. Okay, I'm going to have some things to say about this, and but we're going to read what he says first. So one idea is to go for 3 reasonably sized speakers with a couple of subs, using an 80 hertz crossover and spreading his available budget across all of those items. Another idea is to pour all of his budget into just one pair of high-end towers like the B&W 802 Diamond Towers or the Golden Ear Triton ones. And a solar friend of his says quite a few clients these days are opting to put all of their budget into just a 2.1 setup with a big flat panel rather than trying to stretch their budget to cover a full surround sound or immersive audio configuration. What would we say? All of that money into a big pair of full range towers, or spread the budget for a smaller sound array? Okay. I want to back up. I think that your biggest problem here is these subwoofers. I'm gonna say
that's gonna be part of it for sure.
Yeah, the first thing I would do, number one first thing I'd do would be to take and disconnect those subwoofers, pretend they don't exist, and then get 2 more subwoofers, or get a subwoofer, get whatever you're going to end up getting, using those in the room with your existing speakers. I would also disconnect a whole bunch of them. I would start disconnecting all the Atmos. I would start with all the Atmos. I would disconnect all of them, and I would just listen to. I would disconnect the surround back speaker, so I would have the 2 surround speakers overhead that would be the only ones working, the 3 fronts, and then 2 subwoofers that are in the room. I would start listening with that, and then see how it sounds to you.
Yeah, so you haven't actually replaced anything other than the subwoofers.
Yes, I think the subwoofers have got it. But
the sounds getting in from outside, just because these are installed on an exterior wall, that's not gonna stop.
That's not going to stop no matter what, unless you take them out of the wall anyway. So
in-wall speakers don't have to vibrate and rattle. This seems like wasn't the greatest installation.
Well, but if anything's rattling these things, it's the subs. So turn those things off to begin with, and then put subs in your room. I think you're gonna have a better chance. Then from that point, because I know what you're saying here. You want to just kind of get away from all this stuff, but I think that you should try working with what you have. I know that's probably not a very popular thing to say, because most people would be like, help me spend money. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna help you spend some money. No, I think that we should not do that. We should buy the subwoofers, because your subwoofers are an issue that I think are the primary source of all of your problems. And turn those things off. You put the subwoofers in your room. You use your existing speakers, and I might even go down to 4 speakers. Front, left, right, 2 surrounds, and then your subs, and that's it to start with. Listen to that, then start adding these other speakers. I imagine that what you'll find is at some point you're going to have speakers that are above. Some of these speakers are just muddying up everything up. And when you can figure out what those things are, then we can start talking about, I don't necessarily think your front 3 speakers are where you should start spending money. If this were me, I would be looking at putting the subwoofers in the room. I would look at getting rid of this. I don't even think those surround backs are doing anything. I would disconnect the surround backs and the surrounds that are on the ceiling. I would put surround speakers in my actual room someplace lower down, and then use the Atmos overheads, which I think are fine the way they're
placed. The Atmos overheads should be fine.
I would use the Atmos overheads, the 4 overheads. I would use the surrounds that are on the ground. I would use the speakers that are up front in the wall, and I would put subwoofers on the ground.
That's all right. So you're doing piece at a time. Keep some, swap out some, but not a wholesale change.
Yes.
So I'm not in favor of taking all your money and just putting it into 2 gigantic towers that I honestly wouldn't recommend. I would say almost no matter what, regardless. I don't think that's a super high value. Yeah. Now, if you just wanted to get a really nice pair of towers because that's just what you've decided you wanted, that makes sense.
Well, and I think a lot of people who do that are not buying sound. They're buying a set piece.
Sure.
When you buy those B&W speakers, you are not buying the sound of the B&W speakers. They sound okay. They sound okay. They sound fine. I know it sounds dismissive, but I'm sorry. They're
well,
not.
I mean,
they're not a linear
talking
speaker.
Like price for what they sound like. Like they're okay. Objectively, they're very nice sounding speakers, but you factor in the price, and it's like they're not worth that.
Right. Yeah. So, but people are buying the name and they're buying the looks, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The prestige of having these things. But if you're going for sound, we can work wonders with this with your system.
Much less money.
For much less money, and maybe for not even having to do a lot of the stuff. Like, I would rather at least attempt to work with what you got. Now, if you're just mad at it and you just want it to all go away,
right,
then we can work with that too. But I would definitely keep those 4 overhead Atmos speakers going. If you decide to do this, and because of the sounds that are coming in from outside and everything else, I would pull, I mean, you'd have to have a contractor come in and they would have to pull those speakers out and then, shove those bays full of insulation and then drywall it up.
Yep.
Again, which would be fine. And we can work with that. But let's try to see what you've got and unhooking speaker by speaker as you're going around to see what is working for you overhead. Like if you decide that you're like, okay, well, the surrounds are working overhead, but when I turn on the Atmos speakers, it all gets weird, which is what I think you're going to experience. Then taking the surrounds off the ceiling, suddenly the Atmos speakers can work the way they're supposed to. Your surrounds can work the way they're supposed to. Your surround backs can go away because I don't think they're needed in here. And then you just got to decide whether or not you want to replace your front speakers.
Yeah, certainly going through speaker by speaker, that costs you nothing other than some time. So, yeah.
His next question is, he's about 13 feet away from a large panel display. We don't really know how big that is. I'm going to guess it's someplace between 65 and 75 inches just looking at it. But
probably 75, I think,
It's really hard to see. Does he really need a physical center speaker, or would a phantom center be just as good? Well, that is immaterial for how far you're sitting or the size of your room or anything else. It's all about where you're sitting. If you're sitting between the 2 left and right speakers, then the phantom center can work. If you are sitting outside or closer, significantly closer to one speaker than the other, the phantom center will not work as well.
Yep.
So
that's about
where you sit. Yeah. So he asks, if you have large full-range towers like the B&W Diamonds or towers with active subwoofer drivers built in like the Triton ones, do you still need a subwoofer? And the answer, of course, is yes. I don't care what Lee says, yes. And the short answer, the too long didn't read answer, is that the best location for low bass is not the same location for your left and right speakers. Your left and right speakers are placed where they are in order to give you a cohesive soundstage at the front of your room. Your subwoofers, your bass is omnidirectional, which means that you could place it anywhere in your room, but the best place to put it in your room is where it works together to give even bass coverage across all your seats. How do you get that? By diagonally, or by placing them across the room each other in a mirrored location. So if you're in the middle of the left wall, you'll be in the middle of the right wall. If you're in the middle of the front wall, you'll be in the middle of the back wall. If you are in the front left corner, you'll be in the back right corner. Mirrored locations across the room. Once you set them up that way, this is provided that your room is not open to the rest of the house, that it's an enclosed space.
And it might be in a design like this. Who knows?
It could be, or it could very well not be. So we don't know that right now. So if it's an open space, then all that changes. But the reality is that in almost no cases is it. I mean, if it is the case that your subwoofer placement and your front left and right speaker placement is the exact same location, you are a unicorn. You have a unicorn room that should be called Unicorn Land, because it almost never happens.
Yeah, if I'm suggesting to someone what I think is the best way to approach a sound system, you're not going to find me recommending spending a lot of money on one pair of towers. You're definitely never going to hear me saying don't have any subwoofers.
Yeah. Never.
So yeah,
of what you're going to use your system for.
If you were hoping for encouragement from me, I'll say, and I'm pretty sure from Tom too, to spend all your money on one I consider overpriced pair of towers, that we're not the right crowd for that. You'll find people who will say that.
Yeah.
So if you're like, I hate Rob and Tom now, and I wanted to hear what I wanted to hear, then that's an answer too, and we actually helped you.
Yeah, there you go. The reality is, though, I mean, if you're like, I really like these speakers and I want to own them.
Yeah.
Own them. No one's going to stop you from owning them. Buy them. buy them and love them and enjoy them and use them full range or not. I mean, they can be very fine speakers. So knock yourself out. We're not going to hate you for it. But if you're looking for good sound, if you're looking for good surround sound experience, we can help you with that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be it for tonight.
Really? You know what? There's one super short one.
Oh, Rob, you do this every time. It's 11 o'clock. I was literally asleep before this podcast. Which the super short one and where
17, is it? Rob W.
Rob says, we mentioned the idea of pressurizing a room with bass quite often. What's some good demo material for evaluating this effect? Anything with really super duper low bass. So there was I want to say another horror movie. It had it wasn't called Frequency, but it was based on a Japanese horror movie about a low nose. I think it had the girl from
the Pulse.
Pulse, that's it. There is a sound in that one that's insane.
Yeah, you're right. Pulse is crazy.
When they go into like the server room or whatever it is, that sound is insane. The Dory, not Dory, when Finding Nemo, when the submarine crashes, slides into the wall, that one's pretty good. I mean, U571's got a lot of good low notes.
U571 is a stalwart standby. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many of them.
So I have two that are not great movies, but they definitely have some bass pressurization sounds in them. One would be Man of Steel, which honestly, if you rewatch it, is not that bad. But
it is really quite bad.
The World Engine,
not compared to some of them.
Yeah, but the when the World Engine is trying to terraform Earth, that's some pressurizing bass. Yeah. And I'm so ashamed to even say this movie, but Transformers: Age of Extinction.
Oh God! With the thing at the end, with the guy trying to do the thing.
Not at the end. I forget the guy's name.
Yeah, it's sound whatever. He's like drilling into the ground or something like that. Wasn't that the guy?
When he's first coming down and like he's shooting that weapon that turns everything to stone and stuff.
Right. That thing. Isn't that at the end?
No, that's like his introduction. That's when that character first comes in. The movie just is so long that it seems like it's the end because
it's so long.
They're introducing characters an hour and a half into that thing because it's like 8 hours long. And then you know what? David was going to be our the last questioner on this list, but he just suggested John Wick 2 because he was saying that he put his PB-1000's duals into a very small room that he didn't used to have. And he's like, this is the first time I've really it like knocked the wind out of me type of bass. And I'm like, yeah, that's proper pressurization. He's like, John Wick 2 was so awesome because there's the scene where he's going through the tunnels in Rome and he's switching guns. I do remember that. Laid out his whole gauntlet of guns. And he's like, you can feel the different feeling of each gun. Like in your chest, throughout your body. I'm like, that sounds like a killer demo. So,
yeah, that sounds good. I've only ever watched that one on Vudu. So streamed. It's not going to be quite as good. All right, let's go ahead and finish this up. We're going to thank
All right. Well, no, we don't say who we missed.
Got left.
Yeah, so we got Earl and Nick, and then we did answer Rob, so we're skipping down to Infinite Gary and Alvin, and as mentioned, David. That's it for next week.
All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We're going to thank Joshua for going to www.avrant.com and buying us a cup of coffee. So thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua, thank you very much for the donation.
We also want to thank our 58 patrons over at Patreon. So thank you, guys. We want to remind you that we do have a donation pledge, match pledge going on right now. We have an anonymous listener who, during the week of May 17th to May 7th to May 14th, any monies that are donated to us at www.avrant.com will be matched up to $100, and then anything past that, James C will match up to $100 more. So if you can donate during that week, that'd be super awesome. If you can't, I understand. So thank you very much to Anonymous and to James.
Yeah, so May 7th through 14th, send in your donations. You know what? We see repeat donors, which thank you so much. That is awesome. But I would love to see, we have a lot more listeners than that. And it'd be really cool, like $1. Because $1 just turned into $2.
That's right.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
I just want to thank Damien, Carl, John, and Felipe for talking us up to SVS, to helping me out with my my son's computer, maybe if he actually ever gets out of the doghouse, for Carl and John, and Felipe for talking us up to Monoprice. So
yeah, Damien, Carl, John, Felipe, thank you very much for the help.
All right, for AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.